Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome at the official start of the Dutch Blockchain Week 2020. We're very excited to have you with us today. And although we were a little sad that we could not host any physical event this year, we are so looking forward to the upcoming days with speakers from all over the world and hundreds of enthusiasts currently watching this live stream. A very warm welcome to all of you. We are live 3 days from the ABN AMRO headquarters in Amsterdam. ABN AMRO is also our main sponsor, and we are very thankful for them making this event happen. This event is also brought to you by the Blockchain Netherlands Foundation, which is the organization and ecosystem for all blockchain startups and scale-ups in the Netherlands. My name is Scheele. I'm co-organizer and host for the Dutch Blockchain Week, and I'm also board member of the Blockchain Netherlands Foundation. And I have the great pleasure of being joined by Rudolf van E, who is my co-organizer and co-board member of the Blockchain Netherlands Foundation. In the upcoming 3 days, as Blockchain Netherlands, we are hosting 3 days filled with outside inspiration. Professionals, organizations, enthusiasts from all over the world that are giving keynotes and hosting panels about, of course, blockchain. In the days after, we have over 15 other ecosystem events that are being organized by organizations and enthusiasts from all over the Netherlands on topics ranging from healthcare to property, auditing to education, privacy, and so forth. You can find all these events and also all the links, so how you can actually engage and watch these events at our website, dutchblockchainweek.com. So how can you, as a viewer of this event, engage in our program in the upcoming 3 days? Well, there are actually 3 ways how you can do this. First of all, in the beautiful screen that you currently have in front of you, there is a functionality where you can actually send in questions. And questions will end up in the studio, and we will, of course, share them with our speakers. Second of all, is that we also, of course, look at our Twitter feed. So it would be great if you can use the hashtag DW2020 from Dutch Blockchain Week 2020. And a third option, if you prefer to stay anonymously, you can also use our form. It's found at dutchblockchainweek.com/Q. All right, let's start with the first session. The first session is about convergence, because collaboration is the key in blockchain technology. But how can this be facilitated? And what are the next steps in this collaboration on a global scale to bring the technology steps further in the upcoming year? We have 3 global thought leaders that will share their views on this. And at the end of the session, we will also host a lively panel discussion with the 3 of them. Without further ado, I'm going to announce the first speaker. The first speaker is Jonathan Levi. Jonathan is a serial entrepreneur. He is CEO of Hasera. He is co-founder of the Mepasa network and the Unbounded network as well. I think he's the most famous because his role in the Mepasa network, which is the global blockchain platform that was initiated by the World Health Organization and IBM around the corona crisis. Without further ado, I really would like to welcome Jonathan Levi to the Dutch Blockchain Week platform. Welcome, Jonathan. Great to have you with us.
Hello, everybody. Yes, thanks a lot. Super happy to be here. I have a few announcements as well, so it's a very good timing. My session today is going to be around blockchain convergence, but not just. Because when people are talking about blockchain convergence, sometimes they forget that we still need to innovate, right? So blockchain is a very dynamic field with a lot of changes in terms of regulations, in terms of technology, business kind of management. People need to change a lot in order to accept or integrate or embrace the new technology. And basically, in order for us to move to mobile or digital, we had the same transition, and it took some time. And what I see recently, and we see it over the last I don't know, let's say 5 years, kind of more in earnest, since Bitcoin became like a little bit more solid, and it was not just like few crazy people in a basement trying to run something. And then Ethereum came out with smart contracts. IBM worked on Fabric, and I was one of the early developers actually in IBM research working on Fabric. It's important to remember that with so much going on, we have two competing forces. One is, how do we convert stuff to really make sense, and I don't need like 25 wallets or 700 identity standards to work together, because we need the collaboration, as was said, and it's a team sport. At the same time, we still need to keep innovating. I'm going to go over a few things that we have done in the past and just go through kind of an angle that we took in terms of how to work with highly regulated data, environments, institutions, while bringing in kind of the craziness of blockchain and all the disruptions that the technology kind of promises, while keeping people kind of more confident and building it in a safe way with a lot more confidence about the data and not losing control over what is being shared and with whom. So let's start. We are Sarah. We've done a lot. We started very early. First kind of things that we did was, when I left IBM Research after working on Hyperledger Fabric, it was 0.5 and 0.6. My role at the time was actually to focus on, the identity and the privacy of Hyperledger Fabric, right? So if you think about Ethereum and Bitcoin as permissionless chains, where I don't really know who are the validators, and I can propose a transaction, and somebody at some point will probably accept it. And if this, there's like the proof of work when I look at the 51% protocol or algorithm, or however you want to call it, consensus protocol, basically. In Bitcoin, Ethereum just moved to proof of stake. So these are mostly considered as public chains. We started working on permission chains, and people used to call them private chains, but they're actually permission chains. They're not really private, because you're still sharing it across multiple organizations. We've seen at the time, and when I left IBM Research, and we still kept very good relationship with IBM, and they helped us a lot. We helped IBM a lot, I believe, is actually to build products and layers that are built on top of Hyperledger Fabric and on top of Ethereum. So we didn't want to take sides, and I'm going to show it in a more visual way, but we basically started building a full stack access control management system. Because even if you're in a permissioned or a non-permissioned way, when you work with sensitive data, when you need to kind of comply with regulations, or even if you don't worry about the law, but you really care about who accesses your data, who can read it, who can write it, who can share it, it was not that simple to do in a new system which is not centralized. It's not one organization that has a policy and has one HR department and has one Active Directory. We're talking about like a group of organizations, companies, different people, even on mobile. And we are sharing stuff, and most blockchains today are immutable. You cannot erase anything. So we thought it was very important to focus on that. Why do you want to permission? Okay, I think it's clear now. KYC, AML, HIPAA compliance, all the requirements, data retention, identity theft. There's so many things that are related to access management, even in permissioned and in non-permissioned chains. I think it's important to say. Our approach was actually to always build it in a blockchain agnostic way. We didn't want to kind of get into this, Fabric is better than Ethereum, Ethereum is better than Bitcoin, Bitcoin is better than, BSV. We kept a very neutral stand all along, even though I started working on blockchain in 2014. I worked on the Lightning Network, a company called Nero that was founded by Nick Szabo, and we spent a lot of time all around the stack. We really keep it blockchain agnostic, and in the kind of, under the umbrella of Convergence, I want to talk about just that. Why is it important for us to not build so many competing chains that don't talk to each other, okay? So think about that. You want to kind of have a secure interoperability. In the session, we're going to have World Economic Forum. We're going to have a few people from Hyperledger. We're going to talk about a few different technology stacks. But the important thing is that we need to interoperate. And it shouldn't be like one chain ruling them all. I never believed that that's the case. When we worked only on Bitcoin, I was like, that's not going to be the last thing. It was too slow, okay? And we needed KYC. Ethereum came in with a lot of kind of programmable money, right? And there's still an argument whether it's money, it's not money, what are the miners doing, et cetera, et cetera. Fabric sort of Skoda, the ABN is here, and we did some actually, we did a lot of work on Hyperledger Fabric to meet a lot of requirements that actually highly regulated environments mandate. It's not like an option. You really need to have that. But you have to be able to kind of work with everything. You shouldn't take sides. You shouldn't build something that works only on Fabric or just on Ethereum 2.0, Oh yeah, it's phase 0 ready, proof of stake. People need to innovate, but we also need to keep some unified experience, API, tool sets. And that's what we've been doing for quite some time. Our thing was always, we are not here to displace your blockchain. We are not here to tell you, oh yeah, let's port your stuff from Ethereum on Azure and move you to Fabric on. No. We are running Fabric also on Azure. We are running Ethereum also on different cloud providers. It's not a tech problem. It's a mindset of whether you would like to invest in technology that allows you to share information in confidence and to allow other participants to join your network if they meet certain standards or certain requirements. If I have healthcare data, I can share it only with, I don't know, let's say shrinks. Okay, if I have some vaccination, that is very sensitive, I need to protect that. But and to be honest, if you have the right technology stack, you can even do it on Bitcoin. You can even do it on Ethereum. Of course, you can do it on Fabric and Corda because they're more permissioned. But there is enough technology these days that allows us to converge. What I argue, and I've been saying it for a long time, and I'm so glad that very, very big organizations, international and local, begin to kind of, sing the same song of, guys, what are we doing here? Like, we need to start building systems that don't lock our data in one platform, and it's not anything about a specific platform. I was physically a developer and I was the release manager of Hyperledger Fabric. We work with 160 developers, 28 organizations. It was a big thing. Now we have more than 10 clouds supporting out of the box Hyperledger Fabric, for example. That's Convergence. People can move and choose clouds and work with the same kind of technology stack. But we need more, and I'll show you what I mean. It's about me, don't worry about it. You can find me, it's very easy to find me. I'm not a quiet person. But we actually took a stand around decentralized access management. We just took a small part of the stack that is not really small, and we started talking about, okay, let's talk about credential management. Okay, we have private keys, public keys. How do we manage them? So signatures, confidential transactions, or everything around zero knowledge proofs, etc., etc. Next step was actually let's try to manage permissions. So comparing the participants to the organizations and who in the organization can do what and when and for how long. The same with access to data, right? And what is us as a company, and this is why I'm going to bring Nipasa, and I think Nadia is going to talk a lot about that, I hope, in our next panel, is about data sharing and how do we interchange and how do we manage that? Because this data cannot just move and people replicate it, and if it's sensitive, we need to permission and actually understand who is doing what with the data for how long and under what conditions. So we moved from just credential management that we did in 2016 as a company to more permission management that Sarah started doing in 2017. We'll talk about the Unbound and what we've done kind of all over the stack. But basically, when you think about secure multi-party data and digital asset exchange, then we really need to converge. We really, really need to converge. We cannot have an exchange that works only with 4 wallets. Okay, and you see a lot of exchanges that are transferring stuff around, moving stuff around. But now that we are kind of beginning to hit mass market, convergence is really, really key. Let's talk about reality. We did all that stuff, and I'm actually the chair of the token. I'm co-chairing the Token Taxonomy Framework Working Group at the E2Work Alliance. And up until February and March, honestly, Jonathan, myself, right, I was just thinking about, I'm going to spend a year trying to kind of talk about tokenization and legal tokenization. And most of our kind of prediction for the year, okay, we need to make sure that people understand that tokenization is not a bad thing. You can do legally. It's, because some people had there are a lot of scams in ICOs, et cetera, et cetera. So when you say, oh, I want to tokenize some data, it became like a bad thing. And I thought, okay, I should basically spend more time, and our company should spend a lot more time creating we created like a legal token wizard that allows you to tokenize stuff. And we started putting together a spec. And of course, Microsoft was involved, and now Nasdaq is involved. There are so many big players that are trying to kind of tokenize stuff. And then Corona, right? We are all running everything from home because coronavirus hit like everyone, okay? We were kind of worried. And basically, we had a tool that we have built already in 2018 that allows us to basically have a secure, interoperable infrastructure that allows you to move stuff from Ethereum to Fabric to pay in Bitcoin. And we basically, if you look at the left side, it's all the record of ownership and identity and exchange transactions. And then we had some zero knowledge proofs on top, DIDs that Martha is going to probably talk about because she's on the board. And there are so many things that are happening also in a decentralized way, but also in a responsible way, right? And many, many organizations these days began to talk about responsible data sharing, responsible AI, responsible integration, and how do we not kind of build yet another conglomerate that is basically a cartel. So we need to be careful about how we actually exchange data, whose data it is, and how to allow other people to contribute to the platform in a way that is effective, confidential, and actually at scale. I don't know how much time I have, so please interrupt me at any time. I have a lot to say. So if I have like a few more minutes, I'm not going to talk that much about the unbounded. I think but people know about that. It's pretty known. But I think what is interesting is how we always work in different blockchains and work in a multi-cloud fashion. I'm going to just quickly talk about it because I think it's important. And this is confidential, so I shouldn't even talk about that. But let's talk about Mi-Pasa. How did we launch Mi-Pasa in 4 weeks, and how did we get to production in just 8 weeks? What we have done, we actually built on the Unbounded network, and we basically wanted to have a platform. So what is Mi-Pasa? Mi-Pasa is a platform that allows you to take different data sets, allow scientists to write different models, and basically to share insights globally. The difference with the way we do it, or let's say our members are using Mi-Pasa, is that they allow you to understand the sources and the origin of the data. So if you have some data from CDC or ECDC or DCC, and you run a model against it, it's very easy for you to understand what data did your model or your research team used at the time. We use blockchain for a lot of versioning, a lot of interoperability, a ton of Hyperledger stack. We have some convergence with Ethereum these days. And it's actually a live platform that you can try right now. That's less relevant, but this is more interesting, I think. We basically allow multiple organizations, and it can be either the organization itself, or it can be some, what we call them data warriors, that will actually go and take data, cleanse it, enrich it, normalize it, and basically put it in Mi-Pasa in a way that if you look at the center of the chart, you have data, you have the actual model that actually combines multiple data sets. We have the provenance attribution and all the access management that we have in Acera. We basically took all of that and we allow you or other people, or like we work with Wharton and many other institutions, to actually consume the data and the models and the insights. And why this became like a very big platform is because we didn't choose any side. We allow people to bring data from Ethereum and data that is on Fabric, and we work with a lot of partners that are connected to governments. And I thought at the time that in a time of crisis, we should put all our differences aside, and we actually connected Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, and many other cloud providers, and we just all work together. And the best thing that happened to our company is instead of like, what can Acera do for us? It became like, Jonathan, what can Microsoft help you with? What do you need? How can we join? If you want us to join the board and help, no problem. If you need cloud, if you need services, we have people in Microsoft helping us with Power BI to make sure that we can represent stuff globally. So it's an unheard of, I don't know, I didn't expect to live through a pandemic, but I think the level of the crisis made all of us work together in a way that I have never seen before. So that's a huge kind of catalyst to convergence, if you ask me, because all this time people are talking about what is my differentiating factor, and I'm more, I have like better hardware, and the other guy is better with developers, and the third one is, has a lot of solutions around data. everybody came to work on the same platform, and literally, really, I'm telling everybody, Impasa was built on compassion. People just came and helped. People that we don't have really users, we have members. We don't have organizations that are clients. We really have, it's a huge partnership network now. And this is real convergence in terms of taking data sets from different, standards, different structure, file formats, update frequency, and allow researchers to actually focus on research and not worry so much about where is the data, how do I share it, will I get sued, how can I reuse it, can I don't want to reinvent the wheel. And we basically created like a connection between a permissioned kind of infrastructure, because we have some data that is not available for the public and mass consume because it has some personally identifiable information. But at the same time, we want to be able to share stuff with the whole world, because holding data in such a pandemic is actually, I think it's really lethal. Especially when people want to understand what's going on, we need to be able to share that data in a more responsible way, and that's what we built, right? We basically took all of our products, which is something like that, and we just took our stack and we said, look, we usually build a lot of things around the governance perspective and the foundation and the security. We have like zero knowledge proofs and stuff. Forget about it. Let's just put it all together, certify it on all the clouds, and start building a fully pluggable technology stack. We don't charge anything for any, we just launch it to the public, and 100% of the partners didn't charge us like a cent. Some people even gave us money, so that's what happened in Impasa. Something that I'm super proud of, and it's a result of many, many years of building an open source technology stack, as well as building partnerships that honestly, I couldn't predict like COVID, right? But we just came to the pandemic in a way, at least from the technology side, ready. We already had the partnerships in place. We already have people running the underlying technology stack. And it just makes us so much more powerful because we can focus actually on the business logic. And that's part of Convergence. If I had to go now to Microsoft and say, oh, can we start running Hyperledger Fabric? And if they didn't spend enough time in the space knowing about this and it was not open source, I don't think we would have been able to make it in, not in 4 weeks or 8 weeks, in a year. And the fact that Oracle already had it and IBM had it, it was so much easier to work on a converged infrastructure with the same API and just innovate. Okay, I don't know how much time I have, but please, I think I'm kind of done. A few minutes? Okay. One thing that I want to mention, if I take my Hasera hat off and I put my tokenization guy on, is that I think that we are in a very, very interesting intersection right now. On one hand, we are talking about dApps for quite some time. And if you look at Ethereum and if you look at, other chains like EOS, et cetera, we are looking at a lot of communities that have different focuses, right? So there are some blockchains that are built around the computer that cannot stop. You just build something that miners will always run because it's incentivized to kind of pay miners. If you look at what we have done with IBM, Microsoft, Oracle, and others, is basically to build the Hyperledger Fabric framework in a way that it's a lot more easy to comply with regulations in terms of KYC, AML, and understand who the participants are. If I have a minute, I will talk about where I think we should go from here, and we have another full panel about that. But I think we should start thinking about how we tokenize data, how do we tie ownership and identity to people that are not in your organization. Try to think about a much more scalable, large kind of super highway of people coming in with their identity, with their wallet, and they start transacting with other people without any centralized entity. And I think that this will happen only if we start converging some of the stacks, but we still need to keep innovation, going. So we're always going to be like 80% ready. That's what I feel like in the coming 10 years. Yeah, that's my take as an entrepreneur. Yeah, thank you.
Jonathan, many thanks. Many thanks for your introduction, your keynote about both platforms, of course, the Unbounded Network and MiPasa. I think it is a great example how the crisis can actually lead to such great collaboration. So many thanks for giving us a little view behind the scenes. Some questions are dripping in about especially the MiPasa platform. It was announced that some larger governments and also the Johns Hopkins University Hospital, I think, were all engaged in the platform, but also the Chinese government. Is that correct?
So it depends. Some organizations are just giving us data. Some organizations are a lot more active.
Yeah.
So for example, when you work with Wharton University and the Center of Innovation, they actually had more than 50 people, I think, that contributed to MiPasa in different ways. Mm-hmm. We have two mechanisms in MiPasa. Some of it is like pool data, that we pull data from available source out there. It can be GitHub, it can be, Johns Hopkins University has their own workflow where they kind of publish information like once a day. And then we have a lot of push where we allow integrators to actually provide us data almost in real time. It's almost in real time. So instead of us waiting for them to upload some stuff and then we integrate it, we actually get other people that are, again, members, not customers and not, and the members can actually push data at real time. We didn't work directly with the Chinese government on that, but we did spend a lot of time in China working with the Unbounded Network, with what is now called the China Blockchain Services Network, BSN.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I was just curious because, there has been quite some global unrest, some distrust between countries as well. So when we talk about blockchain, of course, we talk about sometimes garbage in, garbage forever. So there were questions about, the Chinese government adding data to this platform and how reliable is it actually if governments are also making decisions actually on what can be found on this platform.
Yeah. This is a great question. So, and several people asked us that before, and just like we didn't want to take, as a company, we didn't want to take sides in the blockchain space, and we helped, the code of Sawtooth and Fabric and Ethereum. We took the same stand here. We see ourselves as a international, privately held company, but an international kind of bridge. So in that case specifically, blockchain can help understand the data and the versioning of the data. If somebody is lying or if somebody seems to be wrong, okay, and I'm not talking about this government or another, or that hospital, or even if it was a mistake, our platform allows you to at least look at the data, and when there's an update or a correction, it's very clear what has changed in the system. So we can't control what people share. We can't control if people lie. We can't control if people tweet stuff that is wrong about the elections, about the post-elections, about the pre-elections. We cannot. What we can do, though, we can version stuff. So if you told me on Wednesday at 10 a.m. and you said, I think it's, the temperature is 38 degrees, so I'm going to write it to a blockchain, and I remember that. And then later on, if you change it, at least we have the version as it was at the time. So think about like a time capsule, a global time capsule around the world. And then we can just see who said what, etc. And by the way, we didn't take any sides. If things were wrong, we just report back.
That is
if numbers look suspicious, we just ask if it needs correcting, and that's it.
That's really great. So Henk is actually asking that we are now in December, last month of a crazy 2020. We're looking forward to 2021, where also a vaccine will be available, hopefully globally as soon as possible. What is the biggest challenge in the upcoming year for MiPasa, and what will happen with MiPasa after, hopefully, this crisis is being solved in the upcoming year?
So I don't know if it's a problem or if it's, but it is a concern. Maybe I'll show it in. Let me see if I have that slide. I can point out exactly the problem that we had. Okay. No, I can use the same slide. So one thing that is a bit of a concern is that now that COVID is, let's call it in, it's very easy for us to get a lot of support, financial, political, institutional. we got a lot of support, right? We have like hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of infrastructure, back-end stuff. And everybody is concerned with what are we going to do once we are going to run out of credit. Because there's a lot of compute, there's a lot of storage, there's a lot of interaction. We work to capacity. We have like tens of people working on Mi-Pasa every day. And it's true. Mi-Pasa cannot sustain itself the way it works right now without having some form of a transaction fee. So while everybody is giving us everything for free, that's great. And we're really grateful for people allowing us to innovate so much with the hardware and the cost and footing so many bills that because we consume a lot of power. I think what we will have to do in order to maintain such a global network and to extend it going forward, we will need to find a model where Mi-Pasa will be self-sustained. I'm not sure exactly how, but some form of a transaction fee of some sort. We don't know exactly where and at what point. It's not going to be us taking the money, but if people want to help and let's say contribute data or contribute models or contribute compute, I think it's going to be fair to pay them. Yeah. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to build it, but there are a few ideas that we have in mind. Yeah. It's true. When people will stop kind of footing the bill, we'll have to find a way that Mi-Pasa cannot just run, on their accounts. Yeah.
Wonderful. Jonathan, I really like to thank you again for your keynote. We will see you back at the panel at the end of this session, right? You'll be there.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
With a camera and everything.
With a camera and everything. Wonderful.
Yes.
All right. Many thanks for now, and we will see you at the end of the session.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, everybody. Glad to be here. Bye-bye.
All right, we directly go into our next speaker. Our next speaker is Nadia Hewitt. Nadia is project lead, blockchain and distributed ledger technologies at the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum is the international organization for public-private cooperation. Nadia is based in San Francisco. I think she's currently in South Africa, actually, but she's usually based in San Francisco, where the forum is working on fourth industrial technologies like blockchain technologies. We're, of course, very curious to learn what's going on in the public-private cooperation. So, Nadia, welcome to the Dutch Blockchain Week.
Thank you, Jan. And yeah, as I'm in South Africa, my Afrikaans is not too bad these days, so I can say goeiedag, hoe gaan dit?
Similar to Dutch a little bit. So
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dutch Blockchain Week. It is a great pleasure for me, Nadia Hewitt, with the World Economic Forum to address you in this keynote. I want to make sure, can you see my slides?
Yes.
You can see the first slide.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So, it's very fitting that we kick off Dutch Blockchain Week with a topic on convergence. 2020 underscored significantly the need for more interoperability in systems. Collaboration and compatibility issues are key to address in a world after COVID-19. And thank you, Jonathan, for paving the way for my keynote. I'll come with the topic of collaboration today from the perspective of data. Jonathan referred to data exchanges using tokenization, data for tokenization. So I'll pick back on that later in my keynote. But really, what are the opportunities of data exchanges and the role of blockchain within? But first, let's take stock of where we are today. In 2020, we've seen blockchain consortia evolved. Some initiatives have moved into solutions and are gaining network effects or have become commercial entities. For some in 2020, we've really seen the potential of industry-wide adoption. On the other hand, several attempts failed, or perhaps getting to consensus was too difficult, which negatively impacted time to market. Various blockchain consortia have seen the benefits of collaboration pay off, where connecting disparate parties, they're creating cost savings or lowering their expense ratios. Or collaboration within blockchain have helped create new business lines or revenue streams. We've again this year come to understand that the challenge of convergence, it's not only a technology problem, it's actually more so a problem in terms of governance, data ownership, regulations, and commercial business models. Thus, convergence is never just a discussion about technological innovations and progress, but it's really a holistic discussion that should include governance, business, technical, and process. There's been a lot written and shared the last year around approaches and success factors as they relate to blockchain collaboration, right? So, I mean, anything from advice on how to become commercial entities, how to scale, interoperability frameworks, and so on and so on. The difficulties of scaling from proof of concept to these industry-wide solutions have emerged as a top area of exploration, and I would say a topic of much debate. We're really still on an ongoing journey to explore and understand what makes for critical factors in successful and well-designed blockchain networks. At the World Economic Forum this year, we've published a number of great tools on blockchain collaboration. I mean, earlier this year, we launched a blockchain deployment toolkit. You should check that out. We've also published an interoperability framework, and then next week, we will publish a paper on dispute resolution mechanisms. So as it relates to dispute resolution, it is pivotal that a blockchain network includes a component to manage the processes by which disputes among parties are properly settled, right? So the reality of having to deal with disputes in the blockchain network can be breached by a well thought out dispute resolution model. Hence, look out for that white paper mid-December. But okay, so with all of that, all the progress made in 2020 within blockchain collaboration, what are the must-win opportunities to collaborate around in the year ahead? With the direction that blockchain technology is moving, we need to also come at it from the perspective of data. Underlying to all these collaborations are data. With the convergence of blockchain technology and other emerging technologies like AI, IoT, etc., we need to use data to empower innovation in the age of the fourth industrial revolution. And I mean, that's really when solutions and collaborations becomes most compelling. Data is what makes all of this possible, right? So we need better ways to unlock data. There's significant value in the reuse of data for public good. And it's critical to ensure that currently inaccessible data is available to solve key challenges, such as optimizing responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. And for that reason, I'm talking today about collaboration and blockchain from the perspective of data and taking a closer look at the role of blockchain technology within such data exchanges. And sorry, when I say data exchanges, it's referring, to the ability to allow for the combination of data from personal, commercial, and government sources, right? And then also allowing for equitable allocation of value so that benefits can be realized by us all. Let me move to the next slide. So I think this slide really demonstrates the magnitude of the issue. Data impacts every company, regardless of industry or geography. You've heard that many times. There's a lot of data created each day, and at the current pace, and that pace is only accelerating, right, with the growth of IoT. However, this data is siloed. It is inaccessible beyond where the data is being housed, even within a specific jurisdiction or within a corporate silo. I mean, locked up. It has to do with a lot of complexities in the data ecosystem. It comes from regulatory barriers, business barriers, and others. But we know that a lot of the data can be helpful to make society a better place and have a lot of impact. Again, it's siloed, it's inaccessible, it's really just ordinarily siloed de facto. You will also be familiar with data-related regulation and how it binds us. As an example, restrictions in data sharing cross-border, which could have enabled us to accelerate a solution for COVID, yet there's data regulatory restrictions. So what is really challenging is that we are entering a world where there's more and more potential for data privacy and sovereign-oriented regulation. And Jan was asking Jonathan about it as well, global tensions between countries, geopolitical dynamics, etc. So we're entering a world with more potential for data privacy and sovereign-oriented regulation. And for us to think about how we move data from place to place, a lot of times it feels like data is just tied up in an ever-tightening noose or complex web that is hard to disentangle from. At the forum, we are perceiving that there is a lot of desire by both society, by governments, civil society, private sector, and really by everyone in the ecosystem to access the data. Again, it can be used for social good, but the network within which it operates is extraordinarily complicated. And I'll share with you a quick few examples. These are all projects that the forum is investigating and playing a role in. To the left top, agriculture. We know, for example, that within agriculture, the data on crop yield is often not synthesized or immediately available or accessible beyond the immediate jurisdiction of that immediate environment of the municipality. Imagine if you have the ability to roll up data on crop yield at a national level and share that across borders. You'll have a lot of information about weather patterns, etc., and things that affect the nature of the agricultural business. Oceans. With oceans, we know that the data resides in territorial waters. It's very complicated because of the sovereignty and the ownership around it is very complicated. But we know that in order to get to clean oceans, we are going to have to figure out how to get and share this data, how to collaborate. Unless we can think of that transit, we're not going to get to the potential we have for sustainable oceans. Other examples here, consumer wearables that can collect data to help with the management of pandemics. Here on the bottom right corner, precision consumption. 71% of all deaths globally are caused by non-communicable diseases. These are accelerated by unhealthy, uninformed, or inaccessible consumer choices. Individual health has now risen to be one of the greatest societal challenges faced today. So the opportunity is, if we can provide individuals with personalized and trusted insights that can help them to sustain healthier lives. I mean, we can create transparent systems for using personal wellness data for the common good. So in talking about collaboration around data and unlocking the value of data, and I promise I'm going to get to the blockchain part very soon, so bear with me, but I do need to touch on the importance of considering cultural notions of privacy. And again, just how complex this gets when we talk about convergence and collaboration. These are 4 examples, 4 different pictures representing different places in the world. China, the UK, France, and the US, showing surveillance cameras. You can see that surveillance, it's becoming an ever ongoing issue. How do we think about cultural issues of privacy? The reality is that a lot of the regulation in that web that I described earlier is predicated upon cultural ideas of what is acceptable to do with data and what privacy protection should be in place. And we know that those are different. So how do we think about globally creating an ecosystem or data collaboration globally, universally, that allows and enables us to access data, because again, it can help us solve many important problems, but can also be respectful of individualized, localized notions of things like privacy or citizen space. Now, this is where it gets really interesting for us blockchain practitioners to really look at the opportunities. And let me try and move my slide. Sorry. For some reason, it's not moving. Let me try that. Okay. So this is where it gets really interesting for us blockchain practitioners to look at the opportunities that blockchain technology offers here. Jonathan actually went in more depth in talking about some of these, the potential of tokenization. He talked about zero knowledge proof, digital signatures, etc. Blockchain is a key enabler in the future of harnessing the full value of data. So think about the potential of tokenization that blockchain offers. Smart contracts as legally binding instruments. The unique privacy preserving techniques enabled by blockchain. And how automation and autonomous software agents or data trust can help enable more flexible data governance models. On-chain data can be encrypted so that it's only visible by authorized parties. When organizations deploy a blockchain solution, they have real flexibility to ensure it addresses both accessing data and data protection and privacy concerns. Blockchain, with other 4IR technologies, are on a path to enable differentiated permissioning of the same data, so allowing for that virtuous cycle of data, right? It can allow the reuse of data, so we can really untap the value of data over and over again from the same piece of data. This is what blockchain allows us to do. It's an enabling technology. It allows us also to have much more transparency in the distribution of data and the compensation and even potential monetization of data. It can also allows us to more accurately source data. Perhaps it would be useful to use an example here. You might be familiar with Tip the Farmer projects. Yeah, that's a good example. So Tip the Farmer projects, that's where I, as an end consumer of a cup of coffee, can actually provide economic value to the origin source of the coffee, in this case, the farmer. So where the analogy Tip the Farmer comes from. But this is an example of a type of model where blockchain is a key enabler to allow us more transparency in the distribution of data and also help with the compensation and more equitable allocation of risks and rewards from the value that you're getting as an ecosystem. So what's the opportunities here for the Dutch ecosystem, whether you in public or private sector? I think as leaders in the blockchain space, we need to understand that with the direction that blockchain technology is moving in, we need to also come at it from the perspective of data. You need to educate and explore this orientation. Access to data is what is in many ways impeding us to accelerate these new technologies and also their adoption in scale. So foundationally, for governments, and can say the same for private sector, but for governments, if they want their citizens to become part of the new economy, the digital economy, they also have to educate and orientate around the convergence of blockchain, other emerging technologies, and forward-looking data policy and governance models. So that way, governments can position for success now. The World Economic Forum is working on initiatives with our partners in both public and private sector where we are exploring these new flexible and forward-looking data models together with understanding the enabling abilities that blockchain technology has to offer. Thank you.
Nadia, many thanks. Many thanks for this great keynote. Also about convergence, of course, from the view of the World Economic Forum. Many thanks. Many thanks for joining us from South Africa. We've got all kinds of questions now also dropping in via our panel. And it's quite interesting. In the Netherlands, there have been quite some experiments with sharing data on blockchain, but most of them were focused on tracking fish or juice or chocolate. So people were quite interested in your explanations about data, about healthcare and crop yields, actually, you know, making the real pressing issues on the world. It's interesting what you mentioned about the new data governance models that, you know, that we also in the Netherlands could definitely learn from and implement. Do you have, from your view, a great example from a government or an agency that is actually already working on this, or have already published any use case or something like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the Japanese government is doing a lot of interesting things in this space. You know, there's also a cultural tendency there within their culture to be more about how we can do and help the public good. I think if you sort of look at the spectrum, the USA, where they value freedom and autonomy, I think within Japan, there's a lot more around how can our data help everybody else and the sort of public good. So the Japanese government is looking at this quite extensively. They with the the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution in Japan earlier this year published a white paper called APA method, which basically look at new consent models. So they say, how can we make sure that data, when we are in exceptional times like pandemics or typhoons, or where data can really help us solve important issues and data is locked up and not accessible, what does new consent models look like to enable us for the public good, where everybody can agree that individuals and, you know, organizations, etc., benefits? What does consent models like that look like? And they also actually very much look at how these emerging technologies like blockchain can be enablers. So called APA, APPA is the short. And they also are specifically looking at healthy living. So as you know, Japan has the oldest aging population. So they really put a lot of attention to how can we help our elderly, and how can we use data? How can we really take advantage of a data-driven economy? So they're doing very interesting work there as well to see how can they use data and emerging technologies, blockchain, etc., to enable healthy living.
Interesting. Well, many thanks for this example. And it's interesting what we've seen in the Netherlands as well. We had over 100 local governments, so municipalities that were practicing with the technology, and actually, due to the technology, found out that the data they were using on a daily basis was far from, for the open. So we had, for example, a municipality in the Netherlands, in the northern part of the Netherlands, where 30 partners were actually, we had to use the data, but were not able to do so because it was all locked in these silos. So blockchain was actually the reason that they found out, and now they build these great apps that are actually being used for Dutch citizens, for example, for track and tracing people that are in deep depth. So, but great example from Japan. For me, the World Economic Forum is one of these great global organizations that is just not only connecting thought leaders and professionals from the field, but also initiating all kinds of incredible projects. If the watchers at home, the viewers at home are not familiar with this, I would really recommend them to look at the World Economic Forum website, where you can find numerous white papers on blockchain technology that have been written by well, partners from all over the world, Deloitte, Accenture, and so forth. Nadia, you recently launched a toolkit as well. You also just shortly mentioned this. It's a very impressive toolkit. Can you shortly tell us what it is about?
Sure, thank you. And thank you, Marta, from the Linux Foundation, Jan, yourself. We had a number of collaborators from the Dutch ecosystem who participated in the blockchain deployment toolkit. There was so much hype 2 years ago. There's so much confusion around. So we worked with 200 plus organizations and really looked at what are the functional and non-functional success factors of blockchain. So it really looks at anything from interoperability frameworks to toolkits on governance to toolkits and decision matrix and all types of frameworks, very practical, that are best practices, lessons, comes from failures that have been shared by, like I said, many organizations who actually lived it. It's called Redesigning Trust Blockchain Deployment Toolkit. You can go and see it's like many hundred pages, but it's a very interactive tools online. You can download things, and it really just provides people with structure around tackling important decisions and making sure that you really take a holistic approach. We have everything from auditing to tax implications, like through to all the people stuff in there. Thank you, Jan, for highlighting that.
Well, it's interesting. You just mentioned that, of course, there was a lot of content that was based also on failures that people made, of course, in organizations. I mean, the technology is quite new. What is the most remarkable failure that you actually heard of and actually implemented in this toolkit?
Yes, it's very interesting because the World Economic Forum, we aggregate the learnings. We will not share who made the failure. So it's wonderful to be in sort of in a place where you can get people to really just share because they want to do good, right? They want to move the blockchain system forward. For me, there was this one where a startup, fantastic solution, didn't consider tax implications. And they were almost a year or something down the line of developing it because, you know, in the beginning, it's IT people. They don't bring the tax guy and to have a seat around the table when they map it out. So they actually had to make a lot of costly decisions later on, costly changes because of certain tax considerations that they didn't keep into account. It's not so much the tax piece, it's for me just reiterating that holistic approach and making sure that you really have the different functions and hats involved from day one as you map out your solution.
Right. Nadia, many thanks. Really, many thanks again for your contribution. And well, we directly are going into the next and the last part of this session, which is a panel. The panel will feature Nadia and Jonathan, who just spoke, who just gave a keynote. And also, we just heard that she is also is Marta. Marta, are you also with us? Just saying hello. Yes, there you are. Great. I can have a look at the screen. Marta Giter-Pikarska. Am I saying this right? Yes, yeah. Wonderful. I practiced this a couple times. Great. Marta, welcome. Marta is the director of the ecosystem at Hyperledger. Hyperledger is part of the Linux Foundation and is an open source collaborative effort creative to advance cross-industry blockchain technologies. And, well, it has become the de facto standard for enterprise blockchain platforms. Marta, welcome. Very happy to also have you with us. Where are you actually calling from today?
Cambridge, UK.
Cambridge, wow! So we have a couple continents together today in the session. That's so great. So great to have the three of you with us today. Let's kick off the session, the panel. It's also about convergence. I think the three of you can give a great overview of what is next, the challenges, of course. Marta, let's start with you. We just heard from Nadia about some interesting failures, about some great developments with governments. The same with Jonathan, of course, with the MiPesa platform. That really was the base for this global collaboration with all the Corona efforts between all the thought leaders globally. I think a great example. Marta, I heard that, and I read actually about vaccinations that are being put on the blockchain by Hyperledger. What's going on? Is this also a project by Hyperledger that you are working on?
So let's start from what Hyperledger is, but probably that's the better part.
Sure.
Which is simply, it will explain that Hyperledger is not working on anything. We are an open source collaboration, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So we are kind of a consortium or an umbrella project. We like to call it a greenhouse, where different open source technologies can be hosted, and enterprises can come and kind of have a safe space for developing code bases. So Hyperledger as such is an organization that just provides that space for collaboration from the open source community, from different companies, big, small, and other nonprofit organizations. And we kind of facilitate the discussions and interactions. So indeed, some of our members do have projects like the MiPESA project or a vaccination project. There is a Ledger domain project around the supply chain of pharmaceuticals. They are also looking at vaccines and, in general, hopefully future COVID drugs. So there are a lot of efforts here looking at how can different participants in the supply chain participate in and collaborate in a safe way. There are also projects around kind of looking at the immunity passports, and if this is something that we want to do, which also obviously leverages the distributed ledger. But I think for this conversation, what is interesting is that COVID, in all its horribleness, also provided a great kind of kick for people to come together and start collaborating. Things that used to take ages, and people were very skeptical of joining someone else's project, now are much more eager to join, because it's more important than their reluctance of collaboration.
Or egos.
Or egos.
It's interesting what you mentioned, Marta, because that COVID was actually the start for all these wonderful collaborations being kicked off. If you look back, and I think the three of you have been part of several great initiatives, some great collaborations. What are the lessons when you look back when it comes to, for example, the size of a collaboration or the governance within a collaboration? Because these are the topics that are currently also, they are being discussed. We also see this in the Netherlands, that these are quite some topics that people are still not sure about. So we're very eager to learn what your take is on that.
I can start since I was talking. So I think that one of the biggest lessons that we learn by observing our members, right? Because we are in the nice position of not needing to kind of encourage people to work with us, because it's like, we need to encourage people to collaborate with each other. But one of the biggest lessons learned is what Jonathan just mentioned, which is you have to put your ego, leave the ego behind the door, because it really is about being equal and collaborating, and you can't just leverage the fact that you're a big organization to kind of bully the smaller organizations into your DLT consortium. In the DLT space, everybody's equal or should be equal. And I think the other, what comes from that as well is that actually technology is the least of our problems. When you build out a solution, technology is fairly solved, right? There are innovations that we need to create there, but most of the time we kind of have it figured out. We know how to do it. The human factor is what really is creates a winning or a losing situation.
Interesting. So it's really interesting what you mentioned, because I've seen in the Netherlands that the Dutch government actually sees blockchain technology as the key for complex ecosystems, for members coming together. Jonathan, I just saw on your slides that you have like an incredible amount of partners collaborating with each other. Has this been working out for you?
So it has been working out. I can also talk about failures very happily and success stories. So people will see the Unbounded and they're like, oh, wow, how did you guys come up with that? And, they don't see all the attempts that we already made over the last 5 years that didn't work out. So people see all of the success stories. So one thing that is important, as Marta was saying, and, World Economic Forum and Nadia specifically is talking about, enterprises are not always built from the ground up to share. Like an enterprise is, they're concerned with the enterprise stuff, the employees, the shareholders, the sales. And when you come to tell everybody, hey guys, let's, sing the Kumbaya, let's hold hands, let's share everything. It sounds great at the beginning on phone notes. It doesn't always scale. Like everybody would like to kind of be part of a cool project and some press releases. But when we actually work with partners and we work with, in Mipasa, it's just members, our job is actually to make sure that people are comfortable with sharing, comfortable with being part of the network, comfortable with contributing stuff. This is why we have a lot of stuff around attribution. If somebody puts together a data set and helps us, it's very clear that that member actually is the one who did it. So there's a lot of work to do, even though people are equal and it's the same kind of wallets or the same identity holder, etc., etc. Some people and some participants actually do contribute more than others. And the challenge is actually to find the mechanism that keeps the incentivation thing going. Because, it's a very short-lived thing. Yeah, I really want to be in the press, and I really want my logo being here and there. And we have more partners that we talk about. Through the Hyperledger network, through the Ethereum Foundation network, we work through, because we've been in the space for quite some time, but we actually are not trying to find more friends. We're trying to find problems that are shared by many people, and it's actually the problems that bring us together. And then we find the right tech, right? So first we need to see, what is the actual problem? Is it fraud? Is it data synchronization? Is it the ability to consolidate reports? Am I spending 80% of my workforce on paying taxes or working out the accounts? Once people understand what is the actual problem, then there is enough technology stacks to put in place. But really, I think it's so good that World Economic Forum and so many large organizations, like international organizations, are actually putting together some guidelines, even in terms of terminology. What I'm doing with the token taxonomy framework, I'm not taking sides. I'm chairing, but it's not Jonathan thinks that we need an identity token. No. We need the members to come in and say, these are the problems that we have, and we would like to contribute and actually put energy and effort to solve these problems. If you're trying to solve a problem that is not a problem, it doesn't last. Well, it is for 3 months, 6 months, not 5 years.
We've seen that, of course, we have seen that in the beginning that blockchain was more used as a PR tool instead of just a technology that was actually solving issues. It's really interesting. Nadia, you just mentioned that not all these collaborations go as they should go. You're going to publish a white paper on dispute resolution. What are the key elements from this white paper? What are the key lessons? If you're already able to share this with the Dutch audience today.
Yes, well, I think very simple terms, and the paper has different frameworks, mechanisms, and options available for on-chain dispute resolution for enterprise-type systems. The real issue is simply that IT people don't understand law, lawyers doesn't necessarily understand IT, and apologies to those few that wears many hats, but we don't speak the same language. And when a lot of the consortia, and Marta can also really speak to this, when they develop playbooks and their business network operation manuals and things like that, it does start off with much more of a technological view, which it should for sure. But then you're missing the data policy experts and the legal experts in that. So bringing this together, when you talk about collaboration, being able to bridge the gaps between these different functions and disciplines is really, really important. So I think when you talk about dispute resolution, and Marta was reading as well the white paper draft, we had multiple people comment and contribute and provide input and argue over what's right and what's wrong and what's the best and what's not the best. But you see it there, one group will say, this is fantastic, we understand everything, the legal. And then the business side is like, no, it's very legal, we need it more businessy. But then the IT people are like, no. So it's like, it's very difficult when you bring such a diverse group of people and disciplines and you're throwing the cultural notions, etc., together to actually then incorporate dispute resolutions mechanisms in a forward-looking way, timely into your collaboration playbooks or business network operations manuals or whatever it's called for your consortia.
It's interesting what you mentioned because especially with the disputes, we just heard some great examples about all these blockchain implementations with a huge amount of participants. Marta, from your point of view, I'm very curious to learn, have you also seen some disputes, and of course we can treat them anonymously, but some disputes that are being raised in the past months, actually due to Corona, due to the global tensions that rose in the past months? Or is it actually the opposite? Is it actually getting better when we talk about convergence?
To be honest, I don't see it either way. I don't think that it's neither it is improving nor it's worse, at least from what I'm seeing. I think that the paper that Nadia mentioned about the dispute resolution, I think it's great. I was very happy with reading it and learning quite a lot about it. And the discussion or the findings in this paper and in the previous, the governance framework that World Economic Forum published, all of those kind of point to the same thing, which is that actually the DLT consortia are no different than other consortia in the way that in most cases, you do not have some kind of fancy on-chain governance models and automated resolution or anything like that. No, it's always there is some kind of minimum viable governance that says what will happen if we disagree, and there's some kind of either setup of agreement, reaching a consensus between the participants, or there is a third party that acts as an authority on decision making. So yeah, I think that it is still kind of, we treat DLTs as if it's some kind of a completely different way of thinking, and it does require a different way of thinking, but it really is about the distribution part is what we need to wrap our heads around, rather than the technology itself.
Yeah, well, interesting. You mentioned this is the case also with other consortia as well. Artificial intelligence, IoT, blockchain is also to be said to really be the great connector between all of these technologies. Jonathan, you also have been working on connecting these technologies with each other. What practical challenges and opportunities have you seen there?
So similar to what Marta was saying, that when you build a consortium, you have all this problem with governance, and do you have like a minimum viable governance? Do you have a viable governance? Like many consortiums, like on one dispute, the whole thing breaks down. So it's all okay, when in a good market. And what do you do when there are disputes? So I can talk about a few challenges that we see in production, because we run a few production networks, either as network managers or part of a consortium, or as advisors, or just people that run our tech. One thing that people forget about enterprise blockchains is actually the cost. And we see it in MIPASA too. So let's say there's a very big set of members, and they really care about some container management system with tax. But for them, it makes a lot of sense to have very, very strong computers with a lot of storage, and they care about transactions, and they transact several times an hour. And then there's a small supplier that comes in, and they need to share the costs. But they have one transaction once a month. How do we split the difference? Okay, do we pay the same way? Do we pay per transaction? Is there a minimum payment? So that kind of thing works in a small network. And in an environment that we see when the network grows, we have to tell them, guys, switch this is not the POC anymore. This is runtime. It needs to be sustainable. So the people that usually initiate a blockchain project are not necessarily the ones that will actually take it to the next level. And if I talk as a startup guy, what you do pre-seed, what you do for Series A is not the same when you run a $20 million company. It's not the same when you're like going to IPO. It's different skills. I'm a CEO that is like really technical. Some CEOs, will completely overtake me when it's $1 billion company because they've done it for 20 years. So it's a different game. So when you start a blockchain project with 4 people and you want to get the economics right, you need one set of skills. When it goes to like, let's say up to 50 to 100 members, it's a different one. When you run what we do now that has kind of integration of big partners with a lot of consumers, now that universities, students, people running models, it's a completely different skill set. Now we have like UI issues, mobile support. So our team started with a blockchain team, then we started with an integration team. Now we need like mobile support, UI, models, machine learning, AI. So you have to be able to grow with the network and actually stay adaptive all the time, because it's not the one thing that you kind of set off in like 2016 and it works out 4 years later. Blockchain year is like, I don't know, if dog years is like 7 years, I think in blockchain every year is like 10 years, at least for what we see. At the pace that this is moving, you have to keep up also on the governance and the dispute resolutions. People can break the law even in the digital way. The law is the law is the law. The tax is the tax. It doesn't matter if it was a token, if it was like a suitcase of cash, or you just failed to report. Even as a blockchain network, it's the same challenge.
Yeah,
so people
I'm
need to,
thinking now, I can't say that, but I was told that there was one network that had to really think through the incentivization piece. As you've said, incentivizing, how do you incentivize? I mean, that's everything, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, I wasn't there myself to attest to this, but they had apparently more than 20 economists. And then I don't know how many of them, some of the top game theory specialists, experts, etc., in the room for I don't know how many weeks, just having to come up with the incentivization, the value allocation, etc. piece. It's we have a lot of work to do on there, a lot of exploration, which I also then think blockchain technology is an enabler with what it allows us to do.
Yeah. Sorry, Marta.
I just wanted to mention, because there is actually only today earlier today I had a call with a company that is building out a very serious network, and their trouble is finding people who will run the nodes, because most of the time the companies and serious companies are happy to join the network and transact on it. Why not? Great stuff. But why would I that have completely nothing to do with DLT? I'm not a technology company. Why do I have to run the node exactly? It's a completely different thinking and incentivizing people, because obviously most of the networks out there are still, 1-2 nodes run by one organization and everybody else is kind of just using the network. We don't see that many real kind of properly distributed multi-node networks with validators and so on. And the issue with incentives is a very big one. Also, when we think about identity, if we want to build out this global self-sovereign identity, how do we make sure that everybody's playing fair and some people are not doing too many verifications and claims, and others are, having to pay for the ledger rights and so on. So I think that this will be a very big problem as we move to production, right? As Jonathan was saying, while we were in the POC early production stage, we could have kind of survived with a single node networks, but if we are serious about this, we really can't.
Yeah. Well, we're talking now about incentivizing the members of the blockchain itself, the participants. There have been a couple of very interesting questions from the audience about this. One of them is actually about incentivizing the users of the blockchain. We're now talking about the partners that are actually being setting up this blockchain. But for example, in the Netherlands, we had some great examples about blockchain applications that are being built around health data. But how are you going to incentivize all the actors, the people that are actually going to use this this blockchain, this application, like doctors, pharmacies, nurse takers, and so forth? This was one of the biggest challenges actually with the development, not the development of the technology itself, but incentivizing the users. And I'm very curious to learn if one of you has a great example of where this actually worked pretty well, if there has been some interesting methods that could be shared, or from the toolkit from Nadia, some interesting insights. But incentivizing the users, the practical users of these tools. Nadia, is there something in the toolkits? Is the toolkit from the?
I will keep it short. I'd love to hear from Jonathan within the medical piece, but for me, that goes back to how have you incentivized people 10 years ago, 20 years ago to use technology? How did you incentivize people to use the first Apple? Just because it's distributed ledger technology, a user should not care about what goes on behind the scenes. That's where your user interface and incentivization schemes, your business models, the regulatory piece, data ownership, data policy, all of those things become very important, but it's no different from any other application, just because that's my opinion, sort of really just coming down to the user. But like Jonathan, you operating in a more sensitive, data sensitive space.
Yeah, so I can give you a few examples, right? So we were a bit lucky with Mi-Pasa because of the scale of the problem, right? So we were able to bootstrap the network in the sense that weather.com, for example, I don't want to do any advertisement, but weather.com has a lot of data that they actually sell the data. You know, you can buy satellite data of weather forecasts, sun, temperatures, etc., etc. And they actually donated a lot of data until October 18th, 2020. And what we did, we just made it accessible. And once we were able to bootstrap with a lot of actually expensive data and just give it to the public, and all we did is just allow people to easily consume it, we actually learned what people want to do and how, and then we started giving them more data. And I'm going to get to the statistics in a second, but when we started with just COVID data, when we worked with Wharton, we had a big kind of Wharton Mi-Pasa hackathon, they actually cared more about COVID than the economy. So now they wanted financial models. And then we were able to go to kind of financial data providers, say, look, we got some data from World Economic Forum. We work with all the big institutions and hospitals and governments who have partner network. We would like to do stuff with the economy. We started getting a ton of financial data. And we work with all the blockchains. We get a lot of Ethereum data and EOS data and Binance data. So the challenge normally is actually how to bootstrap. And then I see many consortiums, and we are part of a few of them, you know, over the years, like quite a few. We actually had the wrong model at the time because we had a big godfather that really wanted to run a network. And then it was easy. And when you start...
I'd love to know who that is, sorry.
You know what I mean? Like somebody really wants this to succeed at all costs. And I'm like, okay, so we have a godfather, and then we're all going to play nice. But what happens when the godfather leaves the room? Okay, and then are the kids still playing together or not? And then you realize, oh, no, these guys are not friends. So what happened to us later on, once the network actually bootstrapped, we had enough value in terms of credit and attributions. And we started something that actually somebody at Hyperledger taught me. And he said, look, we have an ambassador program. Try to give people credit for contribution, for bug reporting, for being an ambassador, and give them like a medal. And I literally learned that. I said, oh, really? I didn't know. Yeah, people really care about that, especially now that they're remote. So what we started to do, we put together, I know it sounds like a small thing, but we have hundreds of users just that contribute data for free. And why? Because we had like a model warrior, the person who had like the most influential kind of model, you know, in all of these hackathons, Consensus Health, you know, Stanford, MIT, Wharton Hackathon, we had a few, IBM Call for Code. So we started giving people credit for contributing. And that model is actually still working because now we're getting more and more data and more people running models against this data. Yep. Some of it is public data, some of it is private data. But the bootstrapping thing actually made sense just because of the momentum. Now it's a much more kind of very visible network and platform, and we have different use cases now. But now we found a way to reward people that actually bring stuff to the network.
Yeah.
And even that was enough. We didn't need to pay. We just needed to make people feel that they help.
Yeah, but that's always great in times of crisis that people are actually really offering their help. And I totally agree with Nadia as well. What I've seen in the Netherlands is that lots of consumers were not aware of the fact that they were already using blockchain technology, and they didn't care as long as it was just working out. So, but it was a very interesting question from actually somebody that is actually working on blockchain applications in the healthcare. It's what we just heard. Sometimes there are a lot of people involved. We just heard 20 economists sitting at a table talking about incentivizing. What's like, I think it's a quote from Mark Zuckerberg, move fast, break things. Are we sometimes not going too fast or too slow? And what are the risks here? Marta, what is your take on that?
I think we are both moving too fast and too slow. It's this absurd situation where, on one hand, we should be thinking more long term, and in that way, I am concerned that we are not moving fast enough. What I mean by this is we're building solutions based on some technology that is supposed to provide immutability. Is supposed to provide, is basically supposed to be there in 100 years' time, right? If we set up a blockchain network, in theory, in 100 years' time, it should be the same blockchain network running and being used. But we are not thinking in those terms. We are thinking in terms of traditional, databases, traditional software, where after a year or 2 years, we can just go throw away everything, do a completely incompatible update, and just move everyone to version 10.x, just because. That's not as easy when we're talking about the DLTs. And in that way, I think that there has to be more thinking put into long-term strategy for building DLT networks. But then again, we are moving incredibly fast, and everybody's running very much to going into production, to putting things or proving the value of blockchain, which also leads to troubles with a lot of skepticism that is now being established, right? It used to be that you could just go into a room of VCs and say blockchain, 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 and you got a very nice funding. Sure. And right now, it's quite the opposite, right? If you say blockchain, you are much rather will be asked to leave the room.
What are the skeptic about?
I don't know. It depends.
I think there is a lot of skepticism. The way that I'm looking at it is, or the thing that I'm seeing is, the most successful of our members are not even revealing the fact that they are building using a DLT. If you ask them, they're very open about it. They will tell you all about it. But if they pitch it to a customer or to an investor, we just built really good stuff.
Yeah, I've seen, I think it was also in a report by PricewaterhouseCoopers that most of the blockchain projects are actually not being revealed, so just kept as a corporate secret. So I'm curious to learn from Nadia, you as an organization, as the World Economic Forum, definitely have sped up all kinds of conversations and collaborations between all partners from all over the world. With the current tensions between countries that arise during the corona crisis, do you think this will affect these collaborations? And if so, in what perspective?
So, Marta and Jonathan spoke to it when they were asked at the beginning the lessons from this year. It's the willingness. It's not the technology. There's enough technological innovations happening. We'll sort out the tech stuff. What it comes down to is the willingness, right, of these countries to work together. And I think to also add to that, to go back to my keynote, the role of policy and regulation and the role of data policy. I think we're very focused sort of on blockchain. Will people interoperate with blockchain? I think the importance of how countries are viewing their data as assets, their national wealth, how they are treating GDPR regulations, other data policy, I think will have a huge impact on how blockchain is able to scale in other technologies in the future. We don't always see these tensions play out in very straightforward ways. It might come years later through policies and things that's implemented that you know, to the normal eye doesn't seem that significant, but can actually have quite an impact. Which is also why I really encourage blockchain practitioners and so to really lean into as well the data policy and other regulatory side of things.
Right. Unfortunately, we have to round off. I think we can talk for hours with the three of you, but well, in the end, we are live virtually, and well, the viewers at home already have seen some great keynotes. But I would like to close this session with the question to the three of you. We're living now in turbulence, fast changing times. How do you see collaboration happening within the blockchain industry in the upcoming, well, let's say 3 years? What is the wildest dream? What is the most interesting thing that should be worked on? Very curious on your thoughts. In the upcoming 3 years, collaboration in the blockchain atmosphere. Jonathan, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. I think there are three things. We need to sort out digital identity. I think we have a lot of issues with governance here, including prices and cost and how to get it to work. And I think we still are so far away from interoperability. Blockchain should be something that actually disappear. You know, it shouldn't be in the discussion. I go and I take my Visa and I swipe and it works. And I don't know how it was built and what works and how many nodes and operators are there. I'm just happy to get, you know, the payments going through. And we need to get to that. So identity, governance, and interoperability. These are my three kind of things. Yeah.
Marta?
Yeah, I think that in 3 years' time, I would like to see very good guidelines and frameworks for creating a governance model of the DLTs. The work that World Economic Forum is just brilliant because we really need that. We really need best practices in everything that has to do with building out networks. And then, yeah, I do hope that more of the pan-national organizations, your UN, World Food Programs, and so on, will come out with all the projects that they're working on, because this will drive the adoption. If the most trusted organizations will be clear about building those DLT networks, this will encourage people to also do this, to follow that route.
Yeah. Well, Nadia, there's a lot of kind words about the work. I think the World Economic Forum already has a little framework for governance within blockchain, right? Yeah.
Yes, and we would then also add to that how we see very much in the next few years a world where we can, where an individual will have more right and control over the data, where they can actually set permissioning around what their data can be used for, around purposes. So as Nadia, I allow permissions around my data to be used in these ways. I'm happy for it to be used for rare diseases. I do not want it to be used for something else. And I think blockchain technology that can help with enabling such permissioning around data. So for me, I'm seeing data exchanges, SME, or the forum, really looking at data exchanges where we can not just focus on the protection of data, which of course is very important, needs to be ethically and fairly treated, but where we can really think around how do we allow data to be shared and used for different purposes with the permission and fairly equitable allocation of risks and rewards to individuals and citizens.
By the way, that's exactly what we focus on for 3 years. That's the biggest problem we see as well. Yeah.
We need to talk, Jonathan.
Yes.
Wow, great connection. Marta, Nadia, and Jonathan, many thanks. Really, many thanks for kicking off this Dutch Blockchain Week with your keynotes, with your contribution to this event, also to the panel. We are very grateful for you offering your time and being with us today. Many thanks. Many thanks for your inputs. And we hope to see you soon in the Netherlands at one of our future events. Thanks.
I promise you will.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jan.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
To everybody at home, many thanks for watching the first session of the Dutch Blockchain Week. We're really happy with all your questions, all the feedback that we already got. So many thanks for that. Many thanks for watching the first session. As you know, we have a second session that will come after the break. We have a short break now, and after this, we will have a great session on critical pathways. It promises to be a very interesting session on the critical pathways in blockchain technology. We will be back at, I'm quickly looking at my time schedule. We will be back in 10 minutes. So 10 minutes before 3, we will be back. We will start the second session. Hope to see you there. Thanks.